All right, hello travelers. Welcome to Reach the World. For over 20 years, Reach the World has used virtual exchange to inspire youth to become curious, confident global citizens. My name is Tim, and as part of Reach the World's efforts to support educators and families during the COVID-19 pandemic, we're sharing free live stream discussions with some of our active virtual exchange travelers around the world. You can find an updated calendar of live stream events and much more at home.reachtheworld.org. Today, I'm excited to be connecting with Shelby Hickman. Shelby is a Fulbright researcher who's living and conducting her public health research in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. And she's joining us from Brazil today. Shelby's virtual exchange is open to any student who wants to follow her experiences in Brazil. And we'll add a link to her journey homepage on the Reach the World site in the chat bar to the right of your screen. This will be the first of two opportunities to connect live with Shelby and ask her questions about her experiences in Brazil. And during today's live stream, please use the chat bar to let us know you're here and share any questions you may have for Shelby. We'll get to as many questions as we can. But without further ado, it's time to go on a journey. Let's go to Brazil. Welcome, Shelby.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Shelby. As Tim said, I'm in Belo Horizonte. That's the capital city of a state called Minas Gerais. I moved here from Washington, D.C. in January, so we've been here almost 4 months, and I moved with my husband. I have an 8-year-old daughter, a 6-month-old son, and 2 cats. So that was a pretty hectic plane trip. I guess you're not able to imagine if you've ever been on a plane, but going with 2 cats was a little stressful. While I was in DC, I worked as a research scientist, and I also am a student at the University of Maryland. So I'm studying to get a PhD at the University of Maryland right now. And that's why I had the opportunity to come to Brazil, because I applied for and received funding from the Fulbright Association. And using that funding, I got to come here and do my very own research study. When I'm at work as a research scientist, I'm usually doing research for other people, helping them to do important research. So I'm really excited that I got the opportunity to come here and do kind of my own thing. I'll tell you a little bit more about my research study later, but first I'm going to tell you a little bit about the state and the city that I'm in. So I'm going to share a few pictures with you. Okay, get it started. Okay. So Minas Gerais is a giant state in Brazil. It's in the southeast part of the country. So kind of like South Carolina, North Carolina, those are the southeast parts of the United States. Minas Gerais is in the southeast of Brazil. And it is the 4th largest state in the country. So just to give you a little idea of what that means, this map shows you in red the country of Brazil if it was on top of the United States. So the United States is a huge country, and you can see that Brazil is almost as big as the whole continental United States. So everything except Alaska and Hawaii. My state, Minas Gerais, is known for having really big mountains. A lot of Brazil is famous because it has beaches, and we don't have beaches, but we have some really beautiful mountains. And Minas Gerais is also the first place that colonizers from Portugal came when they learned about Brazil. And when they got there, they found out that in all of these huge mountains that we have, there's a lot of gemstones, and what they were most excited about was gold. So this is a picture of an old gold mine in Brazil. They kind of will let you do tours through today. It's in a city called Ouro Preto. And unfortunately, because the Portuguese were so excited about finding gold here, they treated the land pretty badly, and they treated the indigenous people here kind of badly, and they also forced people into working here through colonial slavery. And my research kind of comes from something similar to that. So I study how workers are treated today. So Brazil is still doing, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second so I can show you some stuff. Today, people still force others to do work in Minas Gerais, like raising animals, cutting down trees, growing coffee and chocolate. There's not a lot of gold mining to do anymore. But since Minas Gerais is so big, a lot of these workers are in places that are hundreds of miles away from main cities, which makes it really hard for police and other people to find them. So for the research study that I'm doing, I'm talking to police, lawyers, and judges to learn about ways to stop that from happening and to help make sure that all the workers here and in other countries of the world that are similar can be treated safe and fairly. And a lot of my conversations now are happening through video chat because, like what is going on in the United States, we're all staying inside because of coronavirus. But when we're allowed back out, I'm hoping that I'll get to go back and do my research in person. And one thing that I'm gonna get to do, hopefully, is go and look at these farms in person with the police. One of my coworkers showed me some pictures from a recent trip that they did where they were just checking out how the farms were working. And they're a little fuzzy, but you can see on the left the farm and the police in their uniforms. And on the right are the pickup trucks that they take to drive out onto these dirt roads and see what's going on. Another cool thing that they're doing here is that they're using drones to go look at the farms and the work sites that are really far away that you can't easily drive to. And the drone is kind of like a flying robot that has a camera. And I think that's a pretty creative way to check on how things are going. And although my research is on, although my research is on workers who might not be treated the most fairly, that doesn't mean that that's the norm here. So most people in Minas Gerais go out of their way to take care of workers and to take care of the environment. There's a lot of really famous products that Brazil makes. Chocolate, I don't know if any of you like chocolate. Something I really like is coffee. And that's a really important part of Brazil's history and economy is growing these kinds of foods. When shopping at grocery stores, you can tell which brands are using these, safe and ethical practices when they're making food. So I have a couple bags of coffee to show you that have the same stamp. This is a less expensive bag of coffee, and you can see there's a little Q and there's workers. And this bag costs about $1 US, and it has a brown Q. This coffee also has that stamp. So I know that when they made this coffee, they were respecting the environment and respecting their workers, but it has a gold Q, which means that the quality of the coffee is considered gourmet. And so this coffee costs a little bit more money. So my bag on the right costs about $3 US, and the bag on the left, almost $1. And I want to show you now some pictures of the mountains here. Something that I really liked to do when I was living in DC was go rock climbing. And because Minas Gerais has such beautiful mountains, there's a lot of opportunities to go exploring those here as well. So on the left is a photo of my daughter, who is 8, doing some rock climbing. And on the right is kind of a long distance view, so you can see that there's palm trees, there's a lot of vegetation, and there's some really big mountains in the distance. So this is just an absolutely beautiful state. And I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity when physical distancing ends to see more. Another thing that Brazil is known for that's been really fun since we got here is soccer. So soccer is just a huge deal. I haven't really been a big sports fan for most of my life, but I've gotten into soccer here just because it seems like everybody is, and it turns out that it's a really fun sport to watch. In the United States, there's not a lot of professional soccer teams, and we don't see a lot about them on TV. But in my city alone, just in Belo Horizonte, there are 2 huge soccer teams. And one is a black and white team called Atlético, and one team has a blue uniform and they're Cruzeiro. And even though everyone lives in the same city, these 2 teams have a huge rivalry. So my husband was born in this city, and he, for a long time, has been a fan of Atlético. So he got us all jerseys on the second day that we got to Brazil. Even my baby son has one. Another thing we did in our first week here was we walked over to the stadium and we looked at the outside of the stadium. So now I'm going to share some pictures from outside of the stadium with you. Share PowerPoint. Okay. So outside of the soccer stadium here, there's a bunch of really cool murals On the left is a dog skateboarding, which is pretty cool. And on the right is my daughter and our dog Flock, and a little baby and a flower. And then here is kind of a more detailed one with a bird and a woman and a poem underneath. And this is just the outside of the soccer stadium. When you go on the inside of the soccer stadium, let me see if I have, oh, I don't have a picture for you, but there's just thousands and thousands of fans, like nothing I've ever seen before. And they'll hold up their shirts to make letters in the stadium. It's a pretty cool experience. Another thing I just wanted to show you a couple pictures of are some of the animals that I've seen here that are really different from animals that I saw in Washington, D.C. So on the top left is the monkey in the tree. And I was so excited. My daughter was so excited to see these monkeys, but everyone treated it kind of like how we think of squirrels. They just were not excited at all to see these monkeys, but we took a ton of pictures because for us, monkeys are really special and unique. And then recently, last week, I went for a run by our lake and I saw these giant capybaras. So on the bottom left and on the right side of the screen, those giant guinea pig looking animals are called capybaras, and they're very cute. And I just learned from Tim that they actually eat snakes, so they also are a pretty helpful animal. And then the last thing I just wanted to talk about so far is that the weather here is always really warm and nice out, but our seasons are actually opposite of the seasons that happen in the United States. So while you all are about to enter summer break and enter summer season, we're actually entering winter. And I'm pretty excited because it can be really hot here and there's not air conditioning like there is in the United States everywhere. So I'm looking forward to the weather cooling down a little bit. But one thing that's really nice when the weather is hot is that you can drink fresh coconut water. So I have a coconut here to show you. Before we were doing physical distancing, we got to go outside and people would sell these all over the place. They cut the top off for you and put a straw in it. And it would be about $1 or 5 reais here. But now that we're inside, we have to take a big knife and cut them ourselves if we want coconut water. And that's pretty much all that I had to go through, Tim. Great. I don't know if anyone has questions, or I can show some other stuff if anyone wants.
Yeah, Shelby, that was an awesome interview, or I'm sorry, an awesome introduction to yourself and what you're up to in Brazil and some of the big exciting parts of your life. I want to ask you a couple questions about some of the just regular aspects of your life that I think are really good as points of comparison. Before you were stuck at home, presuming you're stuck at home as part of the pandemic, how do people get around in Belo Horizonte?
Oh, that's a really good question. Some of the same ways. So there's cars, taxis, city buses. There's a lot of motorcycles here because the traffic can be so bad. Most people, if they can, I think they prefer to use a motorcycle because here the motorcycles kind of zip in and out of cars when they're not moving. The way that I get around, since I am not allowed to drive, I don't have a driver's license in Brazil. I use the city bus. And the first time I took the city bus, I got on going the wrong way. And then another time I took a bus that I was not supposed to take also. So it took me a lot of learning. In Washington, D.C., I guess I took for granted that there's a lot of really well-labeled signs for the bus stops. The bus fee is always the same no matter what kind of bus you're getting on. Here, you really have to rely on asking people, you know, is this the bus stop that I'm looking for? Can you let me know when we're close to my stop? So taking the bus kind of gave me the confidence to talk to people, to ask what was going on. And everyone's super nice because they understand that if you haven't done it before, you kind of don't know how to navigate it.
Yeah, that's such good advice. You gotta ask your question if you have one when you're in a new place. I think you have joined a long list of people who have gotten on the bus and gone the wrong way their first time. It's sort of a rite of passage. It kind of begs the question. I think a lot of people without a lot of firsthand knowledge of Brazil assume that because it's in South America that people speak Spanish, and you touched on the fact that that's not the case. People speak Portuguese. How is your Portuguese? And do you use it to ask your questions about where the bus is going and other questions?
Yes, my Portuguese has gotten a lot better in just the 3.5 months that I've been here. I was very nervous to speak Portuguese when I first arrived, but people are just so friendly and nice. And even if what I'm saying doesn't make total sense, usually they can tell either through body language or through hand gestures what I mean. But now I feel a lot more comfortable speaking Portuguese, so I can usually get through my day without too many communication errors.
Oh, that's awesome. Going sort of way back, you seem to be very comfortable living in Brazil and figuring things out in a different country. I'm wondering where your interest in other cultures and, even sort of the path to your living in another country began.
Oh, that's a great question. I actually didn't travel a lot as a kid, so I didn't even leave the United States until I graduated high school. And then I had the opportunity, I went to a country called Guatemala, which is in Central America, and I went to Mexico actually as a college student. We had another pandemic that wasn't quite so bad, but everyone kind of thought it had originated in Mexico, even though it really did not. And so I went there just because ticket prices were cheap. And I actually had a really wonderful time. I got to see amazing things. I met a lot of friends. And then that's kind of when I realized, there's so much to learn that we aren't exposed to if we just stay in the place that we're from. And so I really enjoyed trying new foods, seeing new places, learning new ways to get around. And then when I started doing my research, a lot of my research is on things that are going on in the US. And one reason that Brazil is a great place to study what I'm studying is that they're doing a lot more than the US is doing, actually, in terms of making sure that the workers are being treated fairly. So, for example, this drone program is really unique, and it's been touted, or people have said, great job, Brazil, you're doing something no one else in the world is doing. So now I have the opportunity to learn not only personal things like new foods and new languages, but to hopefully learn about how to improve something that I see as a problem and bring it back to where I'm from.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I had a question online. One of the viewers is wondering about your daughter's ability to speak Portuguese. Kids are always so good at picking up new languages. Does she know how to speak Portuguese?
I have a long answer for this. So my daughter and I speak Spanish. I spoke Spanish with her since she was a baby, and she went to a public school in DC where they spoke Spanish. And for the year before we came, so I knew for about a year that we were coming here. And I was like, you need to practice Portuguese. You need to watch TV in Portuguese. And she wanted none of it. She was like, no, it's too hard. I don't want to. And I was like, I'm going to be doing so much better than her. I don't know what she's going to do. And she goes to school here in classes in Portuguese. And after probably 2 or 3 weeks in school, it was like she was fluent.
Wow.
So she did way less to prepare than I did and became fluent, effectively fluent, much quicker than me. So yeah. It is true what they say about kids. I didn't believe it till I saw it in action, but she really picked it up quickly.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Sort of unfair for us adults too. The kids, it's so easy for kids to pick up new languages. What about where you're living now? How is your living space different than your living space in Washington, D.C.?
This is something that I am really grateful for, actually. So in DC, we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and it's 4 of us plus 2 cats, so kind of 6 of us. And I don't know how to make a size comparison. If there's anyone who's really good at spatial stuff, it was 700 square feet, which is the size of some people's just big living rooms. Because in the city, there's a lot less space. And here, I'm gonna show you. We live in the house that my husband grew up in and his grandma lived in, right here. And it's got 2 bedrooms also, but we're right under his parents' house. But when he was a kid, that house on top of where, like, our little apartment did not exist. His dad actually built the house, which to me is just amazing. I can't imagine building something like that with my hands. So there's another house on top of our house that has 2 more levels and a couple more bedrooms. But I'm just really grateful that we're able to be outside, sort of, during this physical distancing, and that we have a lot more space than we had in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. What sort of special foods in Brazil do you like, or maybe have you discovered since you've arrived there, or have known about all along that you'd recommend to someone who's exploring Brazilian food?
That's a great question. So our state that we're in, Minas Gerais, is known for having the best food in all of Brazil. I don't know if I just hear people say that because that's where I am. I don't know if I went to another state if they would say the same thing, but I'm pretty sure that it's true that Minas Gerais is famous for its food. So there's a type of bread called pão de queijo, which it tastes like the bread and the cheese are just baked together, which is probably my #1 favorite thing. There's something called pastel, which is kind of like an empanada. It's just meat or cheese or a vegetable covered in a pastry dough and then deep fried. And then Daniel's aunt, my husband's aunt who lives with us, also, she cooks everything. So she cooks, usually every day there's beans and rice and then some kind of vegetables. So pumpkin, yuca, purple sweet potato, okra, tomato, onion. She makes us quiches. And then of course, Brazilian barbecue is unbeatable. So the meat here is just really delicious also for the meat eaters. And acai. Acai is a berry that grows in Brazil that is becoming more popular in the United States, I think. And the way they eat it in my state is they usually freeze it and eat it with like some kind of syrup to make it sweeter. And this is the plant garden that my husband's aunt has. So she's growing, even in this little garden, there's some corn over here. I don't know if you can see, but there's tomatoes growing. There's all kinds of seasonings. So we're pretty spoiled when it comes to food.
Is she able to grow those all year long, or in the winter will it be too cold to grow?
They grow year round as far as I know. It does, even in the winter here, it doesn't get colder than what would necessitate like a light sweater.
Okay. Awesome. Well, you've succeeded in making me really hungry right before lunch. I am wondering too, just for our North American viewers, I know we are talking, from North America to Brazil right now, which is a long physical distance, but what time is it right there, right in Brazil right now, or where you are?
1:22.
All right, so yeah, we're sort of straight down, maybe a little bit over, depending on where you are in the States, but we're more or less on the same time zone. But as Shelby mentioned earlier, in her position in the Southern Hemisphere, you're sort of creeping into fall, getting ready for winter in Brazil, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. All right, great. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the other places in Brazil that are of interest. I mean, there's probably an endless list, but have you had a chance to journey outside of Belo Horizonte and explore some other places?
Yes. So in January, we went to Rio de Janeiro, and Rio de Janeiro is a state and it's also a city. So we went to the city with the famous beaches. So we visited Ipanema Beach and Copacabana. We saw the famous monument on Corcovado Mountain with Christ the Redeemer, which is the really, really big statue of Jesus with his arms open. And we saw monkeys there as well, actually. They really are everywhere. We got to take a train up that mountain to see the monument, which was really fun. I like taking trains. And we also, for my orientation when we first got here, we went to Sao Paulo, which is another really famous state. And also there's a city in Sao Paulo, the state called Sao Paulo. So we went to the city within the state. And a lot of that week we spent inside because we were doing kind of stuff related to getting ready to start the research, but we also got to go and see, there's a famous street there called Batman Alley, which has a lot of street art or murals, including one of Batman, which I think is where it got the name. And we had a lot of great food in Sao Paulo as well.
Very cool. I was going to mention the street art that you shared outside of the stadium earlier. That's so cool and so distinct. Do you see a lot of street art around?
So outside the stadium, there's a designated area, and so the quality of those murals is, I would say, a lot better than some of the street art that you see just around the city. But in Sao Paulo, there was a lot of really great street art, even outside of that Batman alley. But here, I think there's less of it than there was in Sao Paulo.
Yeah, one of our viewers had noticed your background, which for a while, at least I first thought was one of the digital backgrounds that you can get now. It's so beautiful, but that's a painting, isn't it?
Yes, this was a quarantine project. We painted this wall, so it goes from blue to yellow once we were stuck inside. And I want to say that I helped a lot, but I kind of helped to start the project, and my husband kind of finished it. So this is his artwork.
Well, it's very nice. I'm really enjoying it. I want to do one final call for viewers. If you have any questions you want to ask Shelby before we sign off, we have about 5 more minutes to go. Please don't be shy. Put them in the chat bar and we'll pass them along to Shelby. We're going to have a chance to connect with Shelby again in a couple weeks. So in the meantime, if you are interested and want to learn more about Brazil and Shelby's research in Brazil, you can go to Shelby's Journey homepage, which my colleague Chris has pasted a link to in the chat bar. And Shelby is in the middle of an active virtual exchange, so you can see all of the articles she's producing. She's doing a great job of sharing that experience through articles and photos as part of the virtual exchange. So definitely check it out. I know it's going to prompt some more questions that we'll pass along perhaps in our next video call. Shelby, I want to ask you sort of as a closing question before we go. Everybody is stuck inside due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What is one place that you're eager to go to as soon as you're free? I know you're probably very eager to get out in the field and conduct your research, but where else, just personally perhaps, would you like to go with your family?
There's so many places. If I'm gonna give you one, I think, and I might be getting this name wrong, but I believe it's called Francisco de Noronha, which they say is Brazil's Hawaii, a little island chain. So I'm really looking forward.
Where is that?
Not Francisco, Fernando. Where is it? It's really northeast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. So on the Atlantic coast? All right, yeah, well, going someplace that's described as anybody's Hawaii sounds really nice right now. I hope you and your family get to go there soon. It's been super nice connecting with you today and hearing about your experiences so far. I really appreciate you calling in from Brazil today and giving us this great introduction to you and your research. I'm so excited for all the students who are stumbling upon this, either have joined today's live stream or are watching the recording. You get a chance to jump right into Shelby's adventure in Brazil and be a part of that virtual exchange. Go visit www.reachtheworld.org. You'll be able to search for Shelby's journey using the search tools, or you can click on the link in the chat bar. There's so much more to discover as part of this virtual exchange. We're really just getting started. So thank you so much, Shelby. I want to thank our entire YouTube live stream audience for joining us today. We will, as I've said before, check in with Shelby again in a few weeks. And in the meantime, we've got so many other live stream events coming up, including a great STEM week next week. So make sure you're checking out the updated schedule of events at athome.reachtheworld.org. And until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks, Shelby.
Yep, thank you, everyone. Bye.